Well, greetings, friends. I get a lot of messages and calls this time of the year, and many are from people who are tired of the same old ways of doing things, and they want to spice things up. We are talking about Seders. Well, the biblical account of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt is one of the most popular narratives from the ancient world. And it can be summed up, and often is, as follows. It is the theme of the Jewish festival of Passover, Pesach, which refers to God's instruction to the Israelites to mark their doors, with the blood of the slaughtered lamb, so that the Lord would pass over them on his way to kill Egypt's firstborn. Now, it's not a bad summary, not necessarily the best summary, but it does have the major highlight. Now, I'd summarize it a little bit differently, perhaps as the ritual of protection from death, the overcoming of bitterness, anger, and sadness in life, and the joining of the ranks of the holy. It was also celebrated by Christians who regard it as the Feast of Maundy Thursday, the night on which the Last Supper is generally thought to have taken place. And of course, the Last Supper was Jesus' last Seder. Now, Maundy, it's a strange word. It comes from a Latin verb from the Vulgate Bible, which we've talked about before, mandatum, command. It's in reference to Jesus' commands after he washes the feet of the disciples, perhaps the first recorded penny in history. It is a festive occasion, and this is the time of Passover, and I did promise I would get a Passover type of Seder or service available for you all, so that maybe you can get some ideas for your own Seders over the next couple of days. And this is the time of the year where we should be welcoming family, friends, and strangers to join you. So let's welcome all those who come into our lives in this congregation of Spirit, Beth Ruach, from Psalm 133, which begins, "How good and how pleasant it is when people live together in harmony." Hine Matov. May these words be a blessing for all who have come to your Seder table this evening, or whatever evening. Friends, as we travel along the path of our lives, it is the people we meet who can change us. Hine Matov. How good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters together. Community together. And it is good and pleasant and a blessing in all lives. Now, thank you, friends, for allowing me to be here to help celebrate with you. Well, a pretty amazing event. One that has been recreated for close to 3,500 years now. And in recreating this event, people the world over use a book called a Haggadah. There are well over 3,000. I know you can't see me right now, but here. There's well over 3,000 different types of Haggadot that people can use, which is also pretty amazing. I have many different ones, and I enjoy them all. But of course, the Maxwell House one is still the world's most popular. Now, Seder, the event that everybody's going to be having over the next couple of days, is a word that means order. And there are 15 steps to the order of the evening, and during the course of which you will traditionally have 4 cups of wine, vegetables dipped in salt water, flat, dry cracker-like bread known as matzah, but which has an amazing significance, bitter herbs, usually horseradish, and lettuce dipped in harosa, a concoction of nuts, apples, and wine, and the festive meal. Now, those are just the key highlights for you. Now, each of these are part of this 15-step dance that combines sights, sounds, smells, tastes, the sensations of our lives. So let's engage our senses before we do anything else and make this a central occasion. By borrowing from the ceremony that marks the end of the sacred time, the Havdalah, the separation, let's bring our attention, our kavanah, into our ability to engage each sense to its fullest, as we become one with the change of energy from winter to spring, from dormancy to life, as we become fully present, fully conscious in the moment. It is an awakening of spirit. And you have all these things at your fingertips. You have candles, you have wine. So we're just going to invoke all the spirits. I don't have them all in front of me, but I know you all have them, and if not, you can certainly picture them in your mind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov. So we begin with candles in our vision. Flame reminds us that within each of us lives the divine fire that can illuminate the darkest of places. May this light enable you to see the work that needs to be done and the awesome majesty of creation. Blessed are you, source of life. Makes us holy with commandments and instructs us to kindle the lights of this good day. Now, grab yourself a glass of wine or juice or whatever you like to have. We raise our cup thankful for the partnership we have with creation. May the fruits of earth nourish each of us and sustain us throughout our journey. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei the blessed are you, source of life, who creates the fruit of the vine. Visible, the sense of smell comes to us through the air. We breathe in the fragrances of life and we awaken. And in our breath, we sound the name of the Creator, awakening us to the creative force that gives breath to all life. May the breath of the universe rouse each of us to strength and to passion. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei minei v'samim. Blessed are you, beloved one, who creates varieties of spices. Now, friends, we think a touch through our hands, holding a beloved, comforting a friend, planting a garden, wrapping ourselves in the talit, the cloth and traditions of our ancestors. May we always know the love and safety we can find wrapped within our own rich traditions. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu el mitzvat tzitzit. Now, blessed are you, O great God, commands us to wrap ourselves in the radiance of creation. Friends, there is a rhythm to the day, to the week, to the year, to life itself, and to all creation. And we need to invoke our senses for it. So whether we know the words or just hum along, we can always feel the music of life. May we all continue to hear it to dance to our own beat. May the source of life and all it is be a blessing to you. Now, as I said, on this holiday, we read a book called the Haggadah, and the opening of every Haggadah story is, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Well, Haggadah is a word that means to tell. And it comes from Exodus 13:8. V'Haggadah l'diber b'yom ha'u, and you shall tell your son. You should read nothing. So try doing this holiday without reading a book. You may face a large table of people with nothing to say. Do, however, take to heart the instructions of the sages and translate that phrase from biblical Hebrew into what it really says. We were slaves to the king of limits and confinement, and the king of limits and confinement, my friends, is our own individual fear. That is our Pharaoh, and that is what keeps us from being free. This is the holiday of celebration of freedom. And what better way to do it than with already having all of our senses engaged? Now, this book, the Haggadah, with its 15 steps today, might be called fake news. The Seder ritual that we've done all our lives is the revision from Roman times and bears very little resemblance to the original biblical celebration. mostly because all the rabbis and sons in the current story did not exist. And just as that was a revision, so today we continue to revise traditions. We've added more fun, more foods, and we've put on things like the plate. We've changed it. We've added the orange. And no one says you cannot change with the times. In fact, you are encouraged to change with the times. There's just not enough change. Now, the biblical word Pesach, which most will tell you means pass over, actually comes from a verb meaning to halt. God as the destroyer did not float above the houses as we like to think, but because he is unknowable and unseeable, we have to let our imaginations create an image. It's how we work. He would float, walk, hover, drift, whatever you picture in your own mind, coming to kill, to destroy, in perhaps a fluid motion, but he would halt, stop, turn, veer off whenever he saw the blood on the doorpost. So the evening of the original halting Pesach was much less ritualized, was much different. This is, my friends, an evening of questions, not necessarily answers. And all questions are welcome. Now, not just the ones in the book. Encourage everybody to ask questions, different questions. And many of you are familiar with the famous 4 questions. We all know them, the Ma Nishtana. All kids learn it. Ma Nishtana. What is so different? Halala Hazeh. On this night, Mikol Halelot. From all other nights. Ma Nishtana. Halala Hazeh. Mikol Halilot, Halala Hazeh. And we're going to look at those questions. This was the most important holy day in the Torah. And it's too bad that celebrating freedom has actually taken a backseat to asking for forgiveness. But that is how we have progressed. You would think that as we progress, we should be better human and spiritual beings all the time, not worse. We should not transgress against our fellow travelers, against the earth and its other inhabitants and components, against our spirits and essences, and against whatever we hold as our universal truths or God. But it seems the more advanced we think we get, the further behind we fall, and our egos keep us from seeing just what we do and how blind we have become. This is the time to set yourself free, especially from your ego. Freedom is your ability to be you, so I will ask you the first question, not generally thought to be one of the famous 4, and it's in 3 parts. Who are you? And of course, who do you want to be? And more importantly, my friends, what is stopping you? I want you to think about those. Now, this may very well be the oldest religious ritual in history, although I think it is probably the second oldest. The oldest being part of the Day of Atonement ritual, but it had a different purpose then. But that's another story. This one is the story of man's search for freedom and his inalienable, God-given right to be free. It's a fantastic story. But too often it is lost in the dogma of ritual and reading and lack of personal meaning. And that's why I get asked, how can we change this? How can we make it more meaningful in our lives today? So we're going to try and change that now. Now, we have brought the traditional Seder, which loses a lot of people, into modern times by adding modern songs to it. Yesterday, Exodus may seem so far away, but we believe we were there that day. Oh, we believe in yesterday. Or here's another twist on an old classic. Take me out to the Seder with friends and family. Serve me some matzah and 4 cups of wine. Ask me 4 questions and we will be fine. Root for Elijah, that he will soon reappear. And let's hope that we'll meet once again next year. Friends, really, is that enough to bring greater meaning? No. It may make it a little bit more fun, but it really doesn't make that big a change. Of the 15 steps to a Seder, you go through 10 of them before you get to the meal. And by then you may be gnawing at your own arm. It's a pretty full evening. But the emphasis should not be about completing the steps. Only one of the steps actually is about telling the story. So which story is supposed to tell? The story of the 4 different sons? That whole section reads more like a parable, or like ancient wisdom literature. How about the story of the 4 rabbis, the martyrs? Well, that whole section is more about the role of faith, practice, belief can take in your life. Okay, there's a recital of the plagues, usually everybody's favorite, but there's actually not a lot of Exodus storytelling in this evening. Now, maybe it's the other story of Exodus, the story of individual freedom, that you should be telling. It is a holy day that we are told to observe in Exodus 12:5 and from 12:18 to 12:26. And the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let them each take a lamb per house. And if the household would be too few for a lamb, then he and his neighbor who is close to his house will take it according to the count of persons. And it will be for you to watch over until the 14th day of the month. And all the community of the congregation of Israel will slaughter it between the 2 evenings, and they will take hyssop and some of the blood and place it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the house in which they will eat it, and they will eat the meat in this night. They will eat it fire roasted and with unleavened bread, bitter herbs. And you shall eat it like this, your hips clothed, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover, Pesahu Adonai. And I shall pass through the land of Egypt in this night, and I shall strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal. And I shall make judgments on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord, and the blood will be as a sign for you on the houses in which you are. And I shall see the blood, and I shall halt at you. And there won't be a plague among you as a destroyer when I strike in the land of Egypt. And this day will become a commemoration for you. You shall celebrate it, a festival to the Lord. You shall celebrate it through your generations. An eternal law. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. And you shall observe the unleavened bread, because in this very day I brought out your masses from the land of Egypt. And you shall observe this day through your generations an eternal law. There, my friend, you actually have the full menu and instructions. Lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, hyssop, and blood. Eat quickly. Be ready to go. And in the Torah, this holiday is not called Passover. It is called the Festival of Unleavened Bread, Matzah. So to ensure you stay engaged, here are another couple of Seder classics to keep all you baby boomers entertained. It was very, very long ago. Pharaoh finally let our people go. They went wandering for 40 years. There was laughter and a lot of tears. And that's the reason that we're here. So every generation knows of God and Moses' liberation plan. And because he is touring again this year, let us get a little help. What would you think if I gave you a tune to help you recall what we do? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and you'll know exactly when we're through. Oi, I get by with a little help from my friends. Oi, I get high with a little help from my friends. Oi, gonna try with a little help from my friends. We all need a little help from our friends, my friends. So how are we going to change this event? To bring it home, to make it personal, try not reading your regular Haggadah. Make this evening a Haggadot. Do not read. Tell the story. Our sages tell us we are to tell the story as if we were being freed from Egypt. Well, we all are. We all have been. We all have constraints, restrictions, pharaohs in our lives, the fears which drain and steal our love of life. Tell your story and inspire those around you, and you can do so by still using the symbols you grew up with. Put down that book. Tell the story by looking at the Seder plate. Okay, this is a plate from Roman times, so it has a few more things on it. But since we all have familiarity with this plate, and we all have a Seder plate either in front of us or in our minds, let's tell the story of freedom from the food alone. Now, one of the more famous things is, of course, the green vegetable, usually parsley. The first fruit of the season of the earth, which we dip in salt water to remind us of our tears. There's truth in that, but it represents something else, my friends, far deeper, far more symbolic. Return to the instructions. Take hyssop and some of the blood and place it on the two doorposts and on the lintel. Yes, we dip the parsley, the karpos, in salt water to begin the evening. We say something about spring in our tears, but it represents dipping that hyssop in blood, which was used to mark the doorposts of the lintels, so that we can be whisked back to our own moment of breaking the chains of servitude, marking the doorposts of our lives, and realizing our freedom, and we can recreate that immortal moment in time. Friends, this is generally the longest part of the evening, composed of the famous 4 questions, the listing of the plagues, the general description of the Passover plate, the telling of the story of freedom, and the singing of Dayenu. Would have been enough. Would have sufficed. And our sages understood we had to be prepared for change, and instructed us that in every generation, each person should regard himself as though he personally had been freed from Egypt, from constraint. So what are the things you have been constrained by? What steps did you take to become free? These are the things to teach, to tell, to influence, to be an example of those you love and those who love, admire, and respect you. So you begin this part of the evening by dipping that hyssop in the blood marking, the doorpost, so that you can begin your march to freedom. The story of Moses, the plagues, the Exodus, the acceptance of God, the 10 Commandments, is one of the greatest stories of all time. In fact, I think it's the greatest story ever told because it is applicable in every age, in every life, to everyone. Now think about it. Moses, an Egyptian word meaning true son. We never know who his father is. In fact, we actually never even know his name. But he represents each and every one of us. We are all the true children of God, all originated in water, and we've all survived plagues in our lives, hardships, tests, and we all ultimately come to realize that living by the 10 utterances, the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, it's really all we need for moral, ethical, and civilized behavior. This is what our Seder should be. We tell the story of our freedoms. That is how we demonstrate to others how we lead by example. It does not have to be the greatest who leads. Any who have overcome fear and constraint must lead others, must help others to see the path of freedom. We do it with food, and we do it with questions. On all other nights, we do not dip even once. On this night, why do we dip twice? And of course, the twice is once we dip the karpas in salt water to begin, and once we dip bitter herbs in harosa to sweeten them. On all other nights, we eat either bread or matzah. On this night, why only matzah? On all other nights, we eat herbs of any kind. On this night, why bitter herbs? And of course, the 4th question, on all of the nights, we eat our meals in any manner. On this night, why do we sit around the table in a reclining position? Now, outside of the 4th question, which really doesn't belong, These all relate to the paragraph of instructions from Exodus, which we just read, the ones that actually give the instructions for the evening. And there are records which show the original Manishtana for questions seems to have included only 3 questions. On all of the nights, we do not dip herbs in any condiment. On this night, we dip them twice. On all of the nights, we eat bread and matzah. On this night, only matzah. On all of the nights, we eat all kinds of herbs. On this night, only bitter herbs. Those are the 3 questions. And there are even some records where the first question, that about dipping herbs twice, was not asked at all. And in its place was a question about eating lamb, fire roasted. Now, these 3 questions correspond even more to the instructions in Exodus we read. And they correspond to the 3 main foods eaten at the Seder. The 3 which must be mentioned. The 3 we spoke of. The 3 which remind us of the ritual of protection from death, the overcoming of bitterness, anger, and sadness in life, and the joining of the ranks of the holy. Those 3, that's it. Boom. Friends, the story of the Exodus, freedom from slavery, is now a universal concept. The power of God in punishing the Egyptians with plagues, it's known by every child, of course. It's not quite how it happened, but that too is another story, one that tells you that even Pharaoh was a slave. We need to focus on other questions. We need to focus on the questions that try our lives. And in every generation, those questions are just a little bit different. What is it that makes something of perpetual observance? It's the fact that it has relevance all the time. So we always have different questions in our lives, and that's why this is a perpetual observance. But let's get back to simply using the Passover plate and food, because the entire story is contained in the Seder plate. Everything on it symbolizes an aspect of Exodus. Right? We'll use the plate you're familiar with. The first thing is ro'ah, the roasted shank bone of the lamb, the dominant sacrificial animal of the Torah. It reminds us of Abraham's sacrifice, or should I say near sacrifice of Isaac, of our origins as children of Abraham, of shepherding, the career choice of our patriarchs and Moses, by the way. And it does evoke the Paschal lamb, which our forefathers offered to God, made as the meal. Now, Rashi viewed shepherding as the career choice of the intellectual. It took little effort and allowed plenty of time to think. Maybe I should become a shepherd. Beitza, the boiled egg whose roundness symbolizes the circle of life and death, the universal symbol from every society. The world egg or cosmic egg, as we see in so many cultures, the primordial being comes into existence through hatching from the egg, such as Ra to the Egyptians, arising from the primordial waters of earth, like the Greek Omphalos. The egg-shaped navel of the earth is honored at Delphi. I've been to Delphi and I've seen the Omphalos. Carp is the green vegetable, usually parsa, but if you have hyssop, use it. First fruit of the season, which we dip in salt water to remind us of our tears, and of the lintels and the doorposts. Maror, bitter herb to remind us of the bitterness of Egyptian bondage and slavery, but it really signifies the bitterness of any confining situation in our lives, when we feel overwhelmed. On a deeper note, the moror, or bitter herbs, remind us of Egyptian slavery is really a reminder that the name for Egypt itself in biblical times was Mitzrayim, the root of which is Mem Tzadi Resh Betzir. Betzir means to limit, to bind, to restrict. The things we do to ourselves to imprison ourselves in fear. And we eat them more, not just to remind us of the bitter past, but because we can survive bitterness. And from it comes the sweet taste of freedom and life. We are survivors, my friend. And let's please take a moment to also remember to honor the victims of, as well as the survivors of the Holocaust. There is a danger in forgetting, in distancing ourselves too much. Their story of freedom is our story of freedom, and must stand as a shining example of the indomitable spirit of man. The fifth item on the plate that we're all familiar with is harosa, the magical mixture of fruit and nuts to remind us of the mortar, which we used in making the pyramids. But of course, the Israelites never did make the pyramids as slaves. So it could not represent the mortar of the pyramids, but it does represent mortar. It had a mystical formula comprised of the 3 roots and 7 fruits from the trees in the Garden of Eden, representing the tree of life. And as such, represents the mortar that holds the universe together. And of course, that mortar, my friends, is love. The last item is matzah, the bread of affliction and hurry, which did not rise because we left so quickly. And rather than see the matzah, the unleavened bread, as a bread of affliction, I mean, how appetizing is that as the name of a holy day, right? The festival of afflicting bread. No thanks. As we are told in several parts of the Torah, the matzah is the bread of holiness and the priest, and allows us to all be priest-like for the 7 days of holiness. It is unleavened, it does not rise, it is bread without ego, the leavening agent of man. Friends, this is not Passover. This is the festival of unleavened bread, the festival of leaving your egos behind. Now, this is a complete upholding of tradition. And the Seder, as we know it and practice it, is primarily from after the Second Temple period, later. And that's why that 4th question is in there, because it didn't fit with the others. And it's one of the reasons that the Torah appears so silent on it. These things were not anticipated in the Torah. The Seder, as you do it, is basically, it's a rabbinic presentation. Now, the Exodus was a unique event in man's history. It was the first event which showed God as the Redeemer from tyranny. It made God something to look to and not to fear. The conception of God as the Redeemer of the oppressed revolutionized the meaning and functions of religion from that point forward. Now, in the words of a contemporary theologian, what makes the Exodus from Egypt a pattern of redemption for all mankind is the interpretation of the prophet who sees God as a redeemer from tyranny. The God of Israel makes history the place where man progresses to freedom. The great scholar Rav Kook wrote about freedom, and he said the difference between a slave and a free man is not only a difference in status, that is, that by a matter of chance one person is subject to another person and another person is not. We can find a wise bondman whose spirit is filled with freedom, and a free man who has the spirit of a slave. Authentic freedom is the exalted spirit to which a man and a people as a whole are elevated, so that one is faithful to his inner self, to the image of God that is within him. Now, out of the whole book, the part of the story that sticks the closest to Exodus is, of course, the reciting of the plagues. And for many, it's a favorite part of the evening. People love dipping their knives or fingers in the wine and splashing it on the plate as we recite the plagues to remind us how both our people and the Egyptians suffered. And there is so much to see in them. But the plagues represent more than just the inconvenience or punishments, my friends. The 10 plagues are presented as a complete counterpoint to creation. The pairing of plagues sees them organized into a division which plays off the description of creation in Genesis 1. There are plagues about land, water, sky, personal comfort and safety, and these lead up to the 9th plague, darkness, evocative of the world prior to the days of creation. Now the earth was empty. Darkness was on the face of the deep. To further associate with Genesis, the Torah emphasizes that the Egyptians were trapped by the darkness and unable to move for 3 days, whereas the Israelites had light in their homes and moved freely, a contrast that also recalls the very first act of creation in which God separated light from darkness. And of course, the plagues all culminate with the Egyptians drowning in the sea, conjuring up images of the flood, God's first undoing of creation. And on this night of questions, we have to ask ourselves whether these plagues may still be plaguing our lives by events that happen to us, by things we do to others, by things we do to ourselves. In this evening of questions, ask yourself, have you fought the plagues? Have you brought the plagues? Now, the answer to both is probably yes. Blood. The life force of man, his ki, his soul, his nefesh, his ruach. It flows through the blood. Has my lifeblood been cut off? Has my energetic love of life and experience been curtailed? Have I cut off another's? Frogs. We all know when you touch a frog, you get a wart. What are the warts in my life? Now, lice, they may not kill you, but they are bloodsuckers. Are there bloodsuckers in your life? Where are you being a bloodsucker in another's? Swarming creatures, often mistaken for a plague of animals, and it was not a plague of animals, but it was really about gnats and other swarming things that interfere with the life of survival. In fact, this is one of the most dangerous plagues. We don't think of little insects as a dangerous plague, but it's one of the most dangerous of all. In several instances in the Torah, we are told of the danger of swarming creatures. That, my friend, is the mob mentality. Are you part of a mob? Are you the target of a mob? We lose our minds in a mob. Pestilence, infectious disease, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, a true harbinger of death, and a term that makes one cringe, like leprosy. It has social implications, and if you have it, you are an outcast. Are you an outcast? Do you outcast others? Boils. It's another disease that is visible. Visible differences incubates discrimination. Do you discriminate? Are you discriminated against? Hail. Now, hail is an interesting thing. It's hard balls of ice and snow, two opposites. These ones were fiery. Doesn't sound so bad after all. It's water, the birth of life, but as a destroyer of crops so that there is no food left. It is unpredictable and brings devastation more often than not. Has hail held you back, and have you devastated another? Locusts, another swarming creature. 2 swarming creatures and 10 plagues. Now that tells you something. Locusts contribute nothing. They're the worst kind of natural disaster, and there are some communities that are considered locusts because they feed off of what others produce and produce nothing of their own. They only bring devastation. Do you contribute and produce? Do you feed off others? I think those aliens in Independence Day were like space locusts that feed off a planet and leave it destitute. Darkness, probably the most prevalent. How many of us still live in darkness? What can we each do to help bring more light to the world? Start by bringing light into your own life. And finally, death of the firstborn. Death takes many forms. We all know people whose spirit has died. They go through the motions of life. Sometimes it's because of hardships. Sometimes it's because their own spirits have been crushed, ridiculed, scorned. Where have I crushed another? Where have I been crushed? Where have I been encouraging? Where have I been encouraged? These are the plagues we face each and every day of our lives, and we can each do something about every one of them, and we can each help others to be free of them. Now, the Passover celebration commemorates an event which will probably symbolize for all time the essential meaning of freedom, namely freedom directed to a purpose. When Israel came forth from bondage, it was not simply to enjoy liberty, but to make liberty an instrument of service. These are the stories of freedom you should be telling at your Seder. Your story is the freedom story that you should be telling. Now, the holiday ends next week with one of the 4 public Yizkor services. 4 times a year we come together as a people to think of public losses, martyrs, defenders, victims. And it too serves as a reminder that we should honor the fighters for freedom. The ones we mentioned before, the victims of the Holocaust, it brings the struggle for freedom closer to our own realities. And I can't think of a better song to end than this Tim Hardin, Bobby Darin classic. Come and sing the simple song of freedom. Sing it like you've never sung before. Let it fill the air. Tell the people everywhere. We the people here don't want to roar. And it was originally written by Bobby Darin, but I think it was probably made more famous when Tim Hardin did it. Yeah. Hey there, Mr. Black Lives Matter, can you hear me? I don't want your diamonds for your game. I just want to be someone known to you as me, and I will bet my life you want the same. 700 million, are you listening? Most of what you read is made of lies. Speaking one-to-one, ain't it everybody's son to wake to in the morning when we rise? Come and sing the simple song of freedom. Sing it like you never sung before. Let it fill the air. Tell the people everywhere. We, the people here, don't want a war. And nobody does. Have an awesome Seder, my friends. Go sing Diana. Enjoy your freedom. You are free now to be you. You just got to figure out who you are. Now, as the melancholy Dane said, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. Figuring out you, for many, there's the rub. Well, thank you all for joining me. Bless you all. Have a fantastic Passover Seder. Shabbat Shalom, and